Hey everyone! In this video, you'll learn how to add audio to your game using phasereditor v4. We'll cover how to load and play sound effects and music, how to mute and adjust volume, and how to trigger sounds using script nodes and player interactions. For these examples, we'll be using an existing phasereditor project that already has UI and gameplay elements in place, and we'll be adding audio support to that project to demonstrate how it all works. By the end, you'll understand the core concepts you need to start using audio in your Phaser 3 games. If you want to follow along, the project source files are linked in the description of the video. How audio works in Phaser 3. Phaser uses the Web Audio API under the hood, with a fallback to the HTML5 audio if needed. This means we get advanced audio features like volume control, fade effects, and the ability to play multiple sounds at once. However, on mobile devices and some browsers, audio won't play until the player interacts with your game, for example by clicking or tapping. So for this example, we'll be taking an existing phasereditor project and we'll be adding audio support to our game. So for our existing project, this is going to consist of 3 scenes. We have our title scene that'll be shown to the player once we've loaded all of our assets. From here, our player can start our game or go into our options. Our options scene will have some settings that our player can modify for our game. They can go back to our title screen, and then when they click new game, we're taken to the scene here where we can have our monsters attack each other. So currently our project is set up with a bunch of UI elements that our players can interact with, but they don't do anything in our game. We'll want to connect these to our Phaser audio settings so that we can do things like turn our audio on and off, adjust our global volume, and then play background music and various sound effects when our player interacts with our buttons in our game. To start working with audio assets in our game, we first need to add those assets to our project. Out of the box, Phaser supports multiple file types, such as the MP3, OGG, and WAV formats. And so when you load your audio files in Phaser, you have the option to provide multiple formats for one audio file, and then that way you have maximum compatibility with whatever browser your end user is playing your game in. So to add our assets to our phasereditor project, we'll want to go into our assets folder, and we'll want to drag and drop your audio files that you want to add to your project. For our starting project template, we already have audio files present in our assets folder. Once you've added your files to your project, we'll need to import these into our asset pack. To do this, we can select multiple audio files at one time, and we'll do import as audio, and we're going to add this to our asset pack JSON file. I'm going to do the same thing for our 2 attack sound effects. So we're going to do import as audio, we'll add them to our asset pack. So now if we open up our asset pack JSON file, we should see our 4 new audio files added to our pack file. By default, phasereditor is going to use the name of our file for our key of that audio file. This key will be important when we want to go to play our audio in our game, since we'll need to reference that file by this key here. So as an example, for my claw audio file, I'm going to update my key to be /. So now when I want to play my claw MP3 file, I'm going to reference it by my /key. Now that we've loaded in our audio files, we can now add code to tell Phaser what sounds we want to play and when. To start playing audio in our game, we're going to update our title scene and our battle scenes to play background music once that scene launches. To do this, let's go into our scenes folder, let's open up our title.js file. Inside our file, let's come down to our create method, and currently we have a to-do where we want to start our background music. So in our create method, we'll want to reference our Phaser sound manager, which is global to all of our scenes in our project. To reference our sound manager, we can do this to reference our Phaser scene, then we can do sound to reference our sound manager, and then we'll have a bunch of methods on our sound manager that is going to allow us to manage our audio and our game. To play an audio file, we want to use our play method. And now in this method, we can provide 2 arguments. First is the key of the audio file we want to load. So this will be our key from our asset pack file. So for our title screen, we'll want to play our title key here. So we'll add in title. And then for our second argument, this is an optional object that allows us to apply settings to the sound that will be played. Some of these settings include things like loop, if we want this audio file to loop once it finishes playing. Since this is going to be our background music, we're going to set this to be true. And then we can also do things like override our volume. And so for our volume, this will be a value between 0 and 1, where 0 will be complete silence and 1 will be the full volume of that audio file. By setting to something like 0.5, Phaser is going to play it at half the volume of that file. So now if we want to test our changes, let's run our project in our browser. So if we click on our play button here, this should open up our browser with our game. And so now once you click on your scene, you should hear your background music start playing. And so now if we come back to our code, let's try updating our volume to be 0.1. If we come back to our browser and refresh, we should now hear our background music, and it should be playing at a much lower volume. Likewise, if we set this to 1 or remove our volume from our code, come back and refresh, now when our background music plays, it should be much louder than it initially was. So now in our game, let's click our new game button. This button is going to stop our title scene and then start our battle scene. One thing we'll notice is that our background music continues to play once we get into our battle scene. What's happening here is our sound manager, this is a global system for our phaser game. What this means is once we start an audio file and play it, it's going to persist for our whole lifecycle of our game. So it can persist across multiple scenes. This is important because if you only want your audio to play in one scene, you'll need to manage this through your code. Likewise, if we refresh our game, let's go into our options scene. If we wait a second, we click our back button. Now we come back to our title scene. Let's just do that a few more times. And what we'll notice is we're going to have multiple instances of our background music playing in our game. Because our sound manager is global, and all we're doing in our code right now is we're just calling the play method, this is just telling our sound manager to play a new instance of our audio file. What this means is these are going to keep piling up, and we're going to be playing multiple instances of our background music. And so this is something to keep in mind if you're reusing and transitioning between your scenes in Phaser. So to fix this issue, we can check on our sound manager to see if one of our sounds are already playing. And so to do that, we can use the get method on our sound manager and provide the key of an audio file to see if it already exists in our sound manager. So let's pass in title. And so this method, this is going to return that sound instance if it's found. So we'll do const sound will be equal to this.sound.get. And so now we'll just add a safeguard and we'll do if our sound exists, then we just want to return early and not play a new instance of our sound. So now if we save and we come back to our game, let's try going into our options scene. We'll wait a second, we'll go back to our title scene. And if we do it a few times, we should only hear one instance of our background music. Now that we have our background music working for our title scene, let's do the same thing for our battle scene. So under our scenes folder, let's open up our battle.js file. So now at the bottom of our create method, let's play our background music for our battle scene. So if we go into our asset pack JSON file, we're going to use our battle mp3 file. So we're going to have a key of battle. So I'm going to come over to our title.js. I'm going to copy our code here for we play our background music. Let's paste that. And now we'll want to update our key to be battle. So since our sound persists across our scenes, we're going to want to stop playing our title music. And so one way to do this is on our sound manager, we can use the stop all method. The stop all method allows us to stop all audio files that are currently playing on our sound manager. So now if we come over to our game, let's click our new game button. Once we get into our battle scene, our background music from our title scene should stop playing, and we should now hear our battle music. So now that we've seen how we can play audio files in our game and how we can control the settings for an individual file, let's take a look at some of our settings that we can apply globally to our sound manager. So two of the main settings on our sound manager are the ability to mute and unmute all of the audio for your game and your overall volume control. So on your sound manager, you have a mute property that allows you to disable all of the audio if you set it to true, and if you set it to false, it'll allow you to continue playing audio. And so for our game, we're going to have two locations where a player will be able to mute the audio in their game. First will be in our settings page, where if we click the off button, we want to turn off the audio in our game. And then from our title and our battle scenes, we have this UI icon here, where if the player clicks it, we want to mute our audio. And then for our second setting, the ability to control the overall volume for our game, we're going to have this slider in our settings where when we modify this value, we'll want to update our global volume on our sound manager. To get started with our changes, we're going to start in our settings scene. So in our settings scene, we have these two text game objects set up. So when we click one of them, it's going to toggle that this option is selected. How this is set up is we have this text game object prefab where it's been enabled for input. So when our player clicks on it, we're now calling this method inside our class called handle sound option selected. So if we go into our scenes folder, let's open up our settings.js file. And if we come into that method, We'll see this method takes in whichever option was selected, so either on or off. And currently all we're doing is we're just updating that text to show that it's selected, and that's how we're changing this color here on that game object. What we want to do now is we want to tie this to our mute functionality on our sound manager. So if we choose the off option, we want to reference our sound manager, we want to reference our mute property, we want to set that to be true. Let's copy that line of code. Now if it's set to on, we want to set this to be false. So what this will do is when someone chooses the off option, this is going to mute all of the audio in our game. If they choose on, it's going to re-enable all of our audio. Now if we come back to our game, let's refresh. Go into our options menu, click off, our audio should get muted for our game, and now if we click on, we should hear our audio again. So now for our next setting, controlling the volume for our sound manager, we currently have this slider prefab set up where we can move this knob on our slider. Now this knob is going to have a value between 0 and 1, and we're going to use that value for setting our volume in our game. And how this is set up in our code is we have this handle volume slider change method inside our settings class. When that slider value changes, this method is called and we're provided that value. So now if we want to control the overall volume for our sound manager, we can reference this .sound and we'll do set volume. And now this method allows us to provide that value, so a number between 0 and 1, and that's going to control the overall volume for all sounds in our game. So let's just pass in our value instance. Now if we save and we come back to our game, let's refresh, go into our options, and now as we drag our slider down, our audio in our game should get quieter, and as we slide it back up, our volume should increase back to the initial value. And that's the basics of using audio in phasereditor v4 through code. We covered how to load sounds, play music and effects, mute audio, control volume, and how to connect these to a simple audio settings menu. In the next video, we'll look at how to trigger audio using script nodes inside phasereditor. Great way to connect sound to your gameplay visually. Don't forget to check the description for the source files and other helpful links.